Ladies and gentlemen, when someone close to you, a man you trusted, hurts you, it can feel like your world tilts. The pain is real. The confusion is real. But in that moment of hurt, you have a profound choice to remain a victim of your story or to become the author of your next chapter. The idea of confusing him is not about trickery or games. It's about refusing to play the role he expects you to play. When he wounds you, he may expect you to collapse, plead, chase, become small. Instead, you rise, you shift, you reclaim your power. You do this by remaining calm when the storm rages. You walk away when staying only deepens your wounds. You become a mystery to him, not by hiding your truth, but by living your truth in ways unexpected. You rebuild your life, your values, your presence. You show him that hurting you did not make you powerless. It revealed your need for power. And now you're stepping into it. In that journey, you will feel fear. The unknown always scares us. But ask, scarier, risking the unknown or staying trapped in pain? What is braver, chasing closure or becoming closure for yourself? So let your actions speak louder than his assumptions. Let your recovery be loud. Let your self-respect be louder. Let your highest version of you confuse him, not with games, but with your integrity, your growth, your rebirth. Because the greatest revenge is not showing him what he lost. Showing yourself what you found. That is your power reclaimed. That is your freedom. That is your truth. When a man hurts you, whether through betrayal, rejection, neglect, or emotional manipulation, his actions often come with an unspoken expectation. He expects a certain reaction. Maybe he expects you to cry endlessly, beg for explanations, chase him, or shrink into guilt and self-blame. He assumes that your emotions will revolve around him, that his actions will dictate your peace. This is the psychological pattern of power imbalance. The one who causes the hurt anticipates control over how you respond. True power begins the moment you refuse to play the part he's written for you in his story. Instead of reacting impulsively, you pause, you breathe, you remind yourself that your emotions are valid. They are yours to manage, not his to manipulate. You stop giving him the script he expects. You stop explaining yourself to someone who already decided not to listen. You stop fighting to prove your worth to someone who could not see it. Refusing the expected role does not mean suppressing your emotions or pretending to be unaffected. It means you allow yourself to feel. You choose not to perform your pain for his validation. It means you detach your sense of identity from his approval. The moment you do this, you confuse him, not through games, but through grounded silence and unshakable self-awareness. When he expects tears, give him calm. When he expects anger, offer indifference. When he expects to see you crumble, let him see you evolve. Energy of stillness will unsettle him more than any outburst ever could, because it reveals that he no longer holds emotional authority over you. This shift is powerful because it moves you from reaction to response. A reaction is emotional, raw, and often self-destructive. It keeps you tied to him. A response, on the other hand, is deliberate, measured, and rooted in wisdom. It frees you. You begin to see that your peace is not dependent on closure, apology, or understanding from him. Your peace is something you decide to maintain. By refusing the expected role, you are rewriting the dynamic. You become unpredictable in the best way, not because you are playing games, but because you have stepped outside the emotional script he relied on to maintain control. This confuses him because he cannot grasp how you've taken back the very power he thought he had taken from you. And here's the truth. People who expect to control you through emotional pain lose their power when you stop reacting. Your silence, your self-control, and your focus on healing send a clear message. You no longer have access to my peace. That message doesn't need to be spoken. It's felt in your actions, your absence, and your energy. You don't retaliate, you recalibrate. You don't seek revenge, you seek renewal. The confusion he feels is not from your manipulation, but from your transformation. It's the confusion of realizing that what once broke you now builds you. It's the realization that hurting you no longer gives him significance in your life. This is the art of emotional mastery. It's how you begin to take back your power. When someone hurts you deeply, especially someone you trusted with your emotions, your first instinct is often to react. The storm inside your heart screams for release. You want to confront, to shout, to demand explanations, to make them feel the pain they caused. But this immediate reaction, as natural as it feels, often gives away the very power you're trying to protect. The one who hurt you may feed off your emotional turmoil. They might feel validated by your breakdown because it confirms that they still have influence over you. That is why calmness is not weakness. It is a weapon, an act of defiance in emotional warfare. When you choose calm in the midst of chaos, you are not suppressing your pain, you are mastering it. You are saying to yourself, I will not let this storm define me. You're shifting from emotional turbulence to emotional intelligence, from chaos to control. Shi Heng Yi often speaks about the principle of stillness, the idea that in every situation, the one who remains centered has the real power. Calmness doesn't mean you are unaffected. It means you are anchored. Think of a tree in a storm. The wind may be violent, the rain relentless, yet the tree stands because its roots are deep. That's the kind of calm you must cultivate. Not surface level silence, but inner stillness that cannot be shaken by temporary emotions or external chaos. In moments of pain, calmness is confusing to those who expect drama. When a man hurts you, he might expect you to explode, to argue endlessly, to prove yourself, to make noise. Your calmness interrupts that expectation. It makes him question his own importance. It forces him to confront his own discomfort, because you are no longer participating in his emotional chaos. Instead of giving him the satisfaction of your breakdown, you offer him the quiet mirror of your composure, and nothing unsettles someone more than facing a calm reflection of their own disorder. Calmness is also a form of clarity. When emotions are high, perception is distorted. You can't think clearly when you're drowning in anger or grief. But in calm, you can see the truth of the situation. You can observe patterns instead of reacting to them. You can understand your boundaries instead of begging for validation. The person who hurt you becomes just that, a person. Not a god, not a villain, not a savior. Just a human being who made a choice. And from that space of calm understanding, you can make your next move with precision instead of panic. This level of self-control also protects your dignity. When you respond in calmness, you preserve your integrity even when someone else loses theirs. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself through emotional outbursts because you realize that your worth is not on trial. You don't need to prove your innocence or your goodness to someone who chose to disregard it. Your silence and self-restraint communicate what words cannot, that you are untouchable in your peace. And let's be clear, calmness is not passivity. It doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or staying quiet when boundaries are crossed. It means you act, not react. You walk away when it's time, but you do it without chaos. You detach with clarity, not confusion. You make decisions not from fear, but from awareness. Calmness gives you the ability to choose your response rather than letting pain choose it for you. When you practice calm in the chaos, you reclaim control over your emotional energy. You begin to heal faster, think sharper, and move with purpose. The one who hurt you may not understand it at first. He may even try to provoke a reaction, to test your resolve, to draw you back into emotional drama. But your calmness is your boundary. It tells him, without words, that the old version of you no longer exists. You're no longer accessible to his chaos. In calm, you confuse the one who hurt you. You break the pattern of emotional dependency. You no longer seek validation or closure. You simply stand in your stillness. You show that your peace cannot be disturbed by someone else's storm. And in that unshakable silence, you begin to see who truly holds the power. One of the hardest lessons in life, and perhaps the most transformative, is learning when to walk away. We're taught from childhood to hold on, to love through pain, to forgive endlessly, to fight for what we care about. But there comes a point when staying is no longer a sign of strength. It becomes a form of self-abandonment. When someone repeatedly hurts you, disrespects you, or takes your presence for granted, Continuing to stay is like trying to heal in the same environment that broke you. Walking away does not always mean you stopped caring. In fact, often means you've cared enough to recognize that the situation no longer nourishes your soul. It's realizing that love cannot survive in a space where peace does not exist. Staying may feel easier in the moment because it delays the pain of loss, but it deepens the pain of slow emotional erosion. Every time you stay after being devalued, you teach the other person that your boundaries are negotiable. You teach them that your silence can be purchased with apologies, promises, or temporary affection. And with time, you lose pieces of yourself trying to keep something alive that's already fading. Shi Heng Yi often speaks about alignment and balance. When you remain in a place that constantly drains you, you disrupt your inner balance. You begin to live in contradiction with your truth. Walking away, then, becomes an act of restoring harmony. It's not a moment of weakness. It's a declaration of self-respect. You're saying, I choose peace over pain. I choose clarity over confusion. I choose myself over chaos. The courage to walk away doesn't come overnight. It's a gradual awakening. You start noticing the patterns, the same words, the same cycles, the same excuses. You realize that waiting for change has become a way of postponing your healing. You understand that staying isn't loyalty if it costs you your sanity. It's self-betrayal disguised as devotion. And that realization, painful as it is, becomes your liberation. When you finally decide to walk away, it confuses the one who hurt you. He may not expect it because he has grown comfortable with your forgiveness. He may have mistaken your empathy for weakness, your love for dependency. But when you leave, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in quiet certainty, it shifts the power dynamic completely. You show him that your value was never tied to his recognition. You show that your love was a gift, not a leash. The moment you walk away, you reclaim control over your emotional energy. You stop waiting for closure that will never come. You become the closure. You stop expecting an apology because you realize that healing doesn't depend on his accountability. It depends on your decision to detach. Walking away allows you to reclaim time, space, and energy that were once consumed by cycles of pain. You begin to redirect that energy inward, into self-discovery, into building a life where your happiness is not conditional on someone else's behavior. And make no mistake, walking away is not easy. It's often accompanied by grief, doubt, and a sense of emptiness. But within that emptiness lies power. The void left behind becomes a sacred space for rebuilding yourself, where your self-worth begins to grow roots again. It's where your boundaries take shape. It's where you realize that you can love deeply and still let go when love becomes harmful. When you walk away, you're not giving up. You're growing up. You're understanding that peace is more valuable than presence. That closure isn't something you receive, it's something you create. Healing doesn't begin when someone apologizes. It begins when you stop making excuses for their behavior. You begin to live by a new truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to fight harder for connection, to surrender with grace. The act of walking away is a silent revolution. It's the moment you shift from being reactive to being self-empowered. You no longer chase explanations, you accept reality. You no longer seek approval, you trust your intuition. You no longer remain in situations that make you question your worth. You walk toward environments that reflect it. The one who hurt you may not understand your decision. He may try to lure you back with words, guilt, or nostalgia. But you'll notice something profound. Once you've chosen yourself, the desire to return to what hurt you disappears. The pain that once tethered you becomes a teacher. The lessons that once broke you become your strength. And that strength is not loud or boastful. It's quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in self-respect. Walking away when staying only hurts more is the ultimate act of emotional maturity. Choosing growth over comfort, peace over attachment, and dignity over drama. It's not a punishment to the one who hurt you. It's protection for the one you're becoming. And though the path of letting go may feel lonely at first, it leads you towards something far greater than the pain you left behind: freedom, clarity, and the rediscovery of your power. After being hurt, a natural tendency to lose yourself, to shrink, to question who you are, to move through life feeling invisible or disconnected from your own identity. The pain of betrayal, rejection, disappointment can fracture your sense of self. You start doubting your worth, your decisions, even your perception of reality. The reflection in the mirror feels unfamiliar. You recognize your face, but not your spirit. Is why one of the most powerful steps in taking back your power is to rebuild your presence. Rebuilding your presence means coming back to yourself, not as you were, but as you are becoming. The process of restoring your inner strength, rediscovering your purpose, and re-anchoring your energy in the present moment. Shi Heng Yi teaches that presence is not just physical, it's spiritual and energetic. How you show up in the world, how you occupy your space, how you project your awareness. When you've been hurt, your presence often becomes scattered. You live in the past, replaying memories, or in the future fearing repetition. Rebuilding it means gathering those lost pieces and returning to now, fully conscious and grounded. This process begins with stillness. You take time alone, not as isolation, but as reconnection. You listen to your thoughts without judgment. You observe your emotions instead of drowning in them. You stop trying to fill the silence with distractions or validation. You let the quiet reveal what your soul has been trying to say beneath all the noise. From that stillness, you start to rebuild, not to prove anything to anyone, but to remember your own essence. Rebuilding your presence also means nurturing the physical, emotional, and mental parts of yourself that you neglected while being consumed by pain. You invest in your health, your habits, your passions, your spiritual practices. You do the small things that remind you that you are alive and capable. You start walking with intention again, shoulders back, head high, grounded in self-respect. You speak with clarity and act with purpose. You no longer enter a room seeking validation, you enter it radiating calm assurance. As you rebuild, you realize that presence is not about perfection or confidence that never wavers. It's about alignment. Your thoughts, words, actions flowing in harmony with your values. When your inner and outer worlds align, people can feel it. Your energy changes. You no longer chase attention, yet you naturally command it. Is what confuses the one who hurt you. They see someone they can no longer read, predict, or control. They used to know how to trigger you, how to make you doubt yourself. But now, your composure and centeredness create an aura of quiet authority that they cannot penetrate. Rebuilding your presence also involves forgiveness. Not for their sake, but for yours. Carrying resentment keeps you tied to the past. Letting go frees you to live fully in the present. Forgiveness is not excusing the pain. It's refusing to let it dictate who you are. You take back the narrative from your wounds and start writing it with wisdom. Each scar becomes a mark of survival, a reminder that you endured what was meant to break you and emerged stronger, more self-aware, and more intentional about your energy. To rebuild your presence is also to rebuild your boundaries. You become clear about what you will and will not tolerate. You learn to protect your energy as you would a sacred space. You understand that not everyone deserves access to your peace, and you no longer feel guilty for saying no. Your time, attention, and emotions become valuable currencies that you spend wisely. You stop explaining your boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding them. You let your actions show that self-respect is not negotiable. As you grow through this process, the way you carry yourself transforms. There's a new kind of silence in your spirit, powerful, steady, and unbothered. You begin to realize that you no longer need to prove your worth through relationships, appearances, or external achievements. You become deeply comfortable with yourself. You move through the world not as someone searching for completion, as someone who knows they are already whole. Rebuilding your presence is not about showing the one who hurt you that you're fine. It's about being fine truly and internally. It's the quiet confidence that comes from self-trust. When your energy begins to speak louder than your pain, when your peace becomes your loudest statement. It's the realization that your life's focus has shifted from trying to be understood to simply being authentic. You start living intentionally again. You wake up with purpose, not with regret. You engage with people and opportunities that reflect your growth, not your wounds. You begin to attract experiences that match your healed energy. Slowly, you feel your presence expanding, not as something forced or performed, but as something real, deeply rooted in who you have become. And when the one who hurt you encounters this version of you, no longer recognize the person they once knew. You're no longer reacting, pleading, or explaining. You've rebuilt your energy so completely that their past actions no longer have power in your present reality. Your presence speaks volumes. It says, I am no longer defined by what hurt me. I am defined by how I rose from it. When a man hurts you, your heart stands at a crossroads, one path leading into the unknown, other looping endlessly through familiar suffering. You know that moving forward will mean stepping into uncertainty, letting go of what once felt safe, and facing the vast emptiness of starting again. Other option, staying, feels easier in the moment. It's the pain you already know, the chaos you've already adapted to, the heartbreak you've learned to survive in silence. But here lies the paradox of healing. The known pain often feels safer than the unknown peace. And so many people remain trapped not because they love the pain, but because they fear the uncertainty that comes after it. Shi Heng Yi often teaches that the mind clings to familiarity. It will convince you that staying where you are, even in suffering, is somehow better than venturing into the unknown. It whispers that maybe things will change, maybe they'll apologize, maybe this time will be different. But the truth is, fear of the unknown is one of the most powerful prisons we build for ourselves. It keeps us walking in circles, repeating cycles of hurt, convincing ourselves that staying is strength when in reality it's stagnation. Fear is a natural human emotion. It's the instinct that protects us from danger. But emotional fear is trickier. It disguises itself as comfort. You might tell yourself, at least I know what to expect, or it's better than being alone. Yet, deep down, you know this is not peace, it's paralysis. Staying in suffering because you fear what's next is like standing in a burning house because you're afraid of the dark outside. The fire may feel familiar, but it's still consuming you. To move forward, you must begin to understand fear, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Fear reveals where your freedom lies. It shows you the exact places where growth is waiting. Every time you feel afraid of leaving, afraid of starting over, afraid of being alone, that fear is pointing toward an opportunity for self-expansion. The unknown is not empty. It's full of possibilities you cannot yet see. But to reach them, you must be willing to let go of what you've outgrown. The problem is, suffering becomes addictive when it's all you've known. It gives you a sense of purpose, something to focus on, something to fix. Pain can become part of your identity. You start to believe that this is just who you are, or that life will always feel this heavy. But the moment you begin questioning that belief, the healing begins. The moment you say, what if I deserve more? You start dismantling the walls that fear built around your heart. The unknown is uncomfortable, yes. It requires courage to step into a life where you can no longer predict every emotional turn. But remember, this comfort is not the same as peace. Comfort can exist inside misery because it's predictable. Peace, on the other hand, often begins in discomfort. When you choose to leave behind what no longer serves you, even before you know what comes next, you cannot grow and stay comfortable at the same time. Growth demands discomfort, and healing demands surrender. Think of the unknown as a blank canvas. When you leave behind suffering, you're not walking into emptiness, you're walking into potential. But potential feels terrifying when you've been conditioned to settle for less. The mind asks, what if I fail? What if I'm alone forever? What if I regret this? Yet rarely do we ask the opposite questions. What if I thrive? What if I find peace? What if I never feel this kind of pain again? That shift in perspective turns fear into a compass, guiding you toward a better version of yourself. Staying in suffering, on the other hand, is a slow erosion of your spirit. It dulls your light, drains your energy, and convinces you that you're powerless. You start compromising your boundaries, your values, your joy, until you wake up one day and barely recognize who you've become. The longer you stay, the more you lose touch with your own strength. The more you endure pain, the more you confuse endurance with love. But love that constantly hurts is not love. It's attachment. It's fear disguised as loyalty. Shi Heng Yi's philosophy reminds us that mastery over the self begins with awareness. To master your emotions, you must first see through the illusions that bind you. Fear says, "You can't handle being alone." Awareness replies, "Alone is where I find myself again." Fear says, "What if it gets worse?" Awareness answers, "What if it finally gets better?" This dialogue is the essence of transformation. You replace fear with curiosity, and suddenly the unknown becomes less of a threat and more of an invitation. Leaving suffering doesn't always mean physical departure. It can also mean emotional detachment. It means withdrawing your energy from what drains you, choosing not to engage in the same arguments, and refusing to chase people who repeatedly show indifference. It means redirecting your focus toward your own growth, your healing, your peace. The unknown becomes the path of rediscovery, where you begin to build a life that reflects who you are becoming, not who you were when you were in pain. Fear will always be present when you decide to grow, but it doesn't have to control you. The real courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking action despite it. Every step into the unknown, no matter how small, weakens the hold of suffering. Every moment you choose peace over familiarity, you reclaim a piece of your power. And gradually, you realize that the unknown isn't something to fear at all. It's where your transformation begins. It's where your strength reveals itself, where you finally stop surviving and start living. When a man hurts you, he may expect to control the story through his words. He might try to explain, justify, manipulate, or twist the situation until you start doubting your own perception. Words can be powerful tools of confusion, especially when they come from someone who knows how to play with emotions. They can sound sincere while meaning nothing, or sound remorseful while masking intention. But what truly defines a person's character is not what they say. It's what they do. And when you begin to understand this, when you stop being swayed by words and start observing actions, shift the entire dynamic of power. Shi Heng Yi teaches that awareness must be rooted in observation, not reaction. Words often operate in the realm of illusion, but actions exist in truth. Someone says they love you, but consistently disrespects you. The action reveals the truth. If someone apologizes but never changes, the apology becomes meaningless. When you've been hurt, your healing begins the moment you decide to stop listening for change and start looking for it. This shift in focus confuses the person who once relied on your emotional responses. They expect you to be persuaded by sweet talk or to melt under promises of, "I'll do better," or "I didn't mean to." They expect that the right words will pull you back into the cycle. But when you stay silent, detached, and unmoved until actions align with words, you become unreadable to them. They no longer know how to reach you because you've stepped out of emotional negotiation. Actions are the language of truth, and truth has a vibration that cannot be faked for long. When someone truly cares, you feel it in their consistency, not in their speeches. They'll show up differently, respect your boundaries, take accountability, and make an effort that matches their claims. But when someone's words and actions diverge, that inconsistency is your clarity. You no longer need arguments or explanations. You simply need to observe. Choosing to focus on actions rather than words also transforms you. It teaches patience, discernment, and emotional intelligence. You no longer rush to trust, forgive, or attach. Instead, you watch patterns unfold. You learn to read energy more than expressions. You see how people behave when no one is watching, not just how they act when they want to be forgiven. Kind of awareness protects your peace because it moves you from emotional reaction to grounded understanding. In moments of pain, it's tempting to demand closure. Why did you do this? Or do you even care? But when you're in that energy, you give away your power. You're seeking answers from someone who already showed you who they are. The most powerful response is not confrontation. It's observation followed by action. You don't argue with someone's words. You respond to their behavior. If their actions communicate indifference, you withdraw your presence. Their actions show deceit, you protect your truth. If their actions show inconsistency, you detach with grace. And this response, your calm, clear, decisive action, is what confuses the one who hurt you. They expect noise, drama, endless discussion. They expect you to be caught in emotional cycles that keep them relevant in your life. But when you stop feeding that cycle, when you stop explaining and start moving, your silence becomes louder than any speech. Your boundaries become louder than any argument. Your absence becomes louder than their excuses. You begin to understand that love, respect, and remorse are not spoken. They are shown. You realize that the one who hurt you may never give you the apology you deserve, but you no longer need it because your healing no longer depends on their words. You've learned to take their behavior as your answer. You've learned that someone's consistency is their truest confession. Shi Heng Yi often reminds his students that mastery is the ability to act without attachment to outcome. When you act from awareness, you are no longer trying to change or control anyone. You're simply aligning yourself with truth. You stop reacting to deceit, and instead, you move toward integrity. You stop chasing explanations, and you start protecting your peace. Decision to walk in alignment is an action that speaks on your behalf. Over time, your life begins to reflect this principle. Instead of defending yourself with words, you let your growth and peace do the talking. Instead of responding to accusations or manipulation, you live so calmly and confidently that it becomes evident who was telling the truth all along. People who hurt you and expected chaos will find silence instead. People who expected you to return will find distance instead. People who expected you to argue will find you thriving quietly. When your actions begin to carry this kind of energy, you stop needing to prove your worth. You don't need to announce that you've changed. The way you live will show it. You don't need to tell anyone that you're at peace. Your energy will speak it before you say a word. The greatest confusion you create in those who hurt you comes from your serenity. Because once they could provoke you. Once they could break you. Now your calm is your rebellion and your actions are your response. The world starts to notice the shift too. People begin to treat you differently because your energy demands respect. You attract relationships that reflect your growth rather than your wounds. You become the kind of person who no longer needs validation because your alignment is your confirmation. You realize that the loudest voice is often silent, the one that speaks through actions, boundaries, and unshakable peace, is the level of strength that no words can describe. It's the strength that confuses those who expected weakness. It's the dignity that outlasts explanation. The quiet understanding that truth always reveals itself, not through what people say, but through what they consistently do. There comes a point after pain when you realize that the deepest wound wasn't what someone did to you. It was how much of yourself you abandoned trying to keep them. You lowered your standards to keep the peace, ignored your intuition to avoid confrontation, and accepted half-hearted effort just to feel whole. That moment of recognition is both painful and powerful. It's when you understand that every time you allowed someone to cross a line, silently told yourself that your worth was negotiable. But real healing begins when you decide that your self-respect is not up for discussion. Not with anyone, not under any circumstance. Shi Heng Yi often speaks of inner discipline, the practice of aligning your actions with your principles even when emotions pull you elsewhere. Self-respect is that discipline in action. It's not arrogance, not pride, not cold detachment. It's the steady understanding that you are responsible for how others treat you. It's realizing that boundaries are not walls built out of fear, but gates that protect the peace you've earned through experience. When you declare that your self-respect is non-negotiable, you begin to live with a quiet authority. You no longer plead for decency. You expect it because you embody it. After being hurt, your sense of self can fragment. You question your value, wondering what you did wrong or why you weren't enough. But here's the truth: your worth was never determined by how someone treated you. Their behavior revealed their character, not your capacity for love. When you rebuild self-respect, you stop seeking explanations from those who disrespected you and start offering compassion to the part of you that allowed it. You become both the protector and the nurturer of your own dignity. Shift confuses those who once took advantage of your kindness. They were used to your forgiveness, your willingness to compromise, your endless empathy. But when you start honoring your boundaries with unwavering calm, unsettles them. They realize they can no longer access the version of you that tolerated inconsistency or disrespect. Your no becomes sacred. Your silence becomes powerful. You stop chasing validation and start commanding respect simply by how you carry yourself. Self-respect as non-negotiable means no longer engaging in emotional bargaining. You no longer convince someone to treat you right. You no longer explain your feelings to people who dismiss them. You stop hoping that your patience will inspire change. Instead, you hold your ground in quiet certainty. You understand that genuine connections will never require you to betray yourself to keep them. You stop forcing what's not aligned and allow the natural flow of energy to determine who belongs in your life. When you commit to self-respect, you begin to redefine what love looks like. It's no longer sacrifice without balance or loyalty without reciprocity. It becomes mutual, peaceful, grounded. You realize that love that demands you to shrink is not love, it's dependency. Love that silences your truth is not devotion, it's control. Self-respect teaches you to choose relationships that reflect your worth rather than diminish it. It teaches you to walk away not because you stop caring, but because you care about yourself too. Shi Heng Yi teaches that the way we treat ourselves sets the tone for how the world treats us. When you respect your time, others will. When you honor your emotions, others learn to handle them carefully. When you hold yourself accountable, others recognize your integrity. This is not about perfection, it's about alignment. Every boundary you enforce is a declaration that you refuse to participate in your own diminishment. You are teaching the universe how to treat you by how you treat yourself. The practice of self-respect also extends to your inner dialogue. The words you speak to yourself shape the boundaries you uphold. When you talk to yourself with compassion, you stop tolerating relationships that thrive on criticism. When you validate your own emotions, you stop needing others to approve them. When you acknowledge your progress, stop begging others to notice it. Self-respect grows from the inside out. It begins as self-talk and becomes self-behavior. You'll notice that as your self-respect strengthens, your peace deepens. You no longer feel the need to explain your decisions or justify your standards. You stop feeling guilty for protecting your energy. You stop apologizing for evolving. And with that comes a new kind of freedom, the freedom of living authentically without fear of disapproval. You begin to attract people and opportunities that resonate with this higher vibration. Because like energy recognizes like, the one who hurt you may sense this transformation and feel disoriented by it. They may try to test your limits again to see if the old version of you still exists. But this time, your energy is different. You respond from self-awareness, not from emotional impulse. You no longer fight to prove your worth. You simply walk in it. You no longer argue to be understood. You live so clearly that understanding becomes irrelevant. Self-respect as non-negotiable also means embracing solitude when necessary. You realize that being alone with integrity is far better than being surrounded by people who require you to abandon yourself. Loneliness becomes peace when it's rooted in self-honor. It's the quiet knowing that you would rather stand alone in truth than stay connected in dishonor. You stop fearing distance because you understand that space is what allows you to grow, heal, and realign. And so your entire presence begins to shift. You speak with calm confidence. you walk with grounded purpose. You no longer seek permission to exist as you are. You've remembered something sacred: your energy is valuable, your peace is precious, and your dignity is divine. You realize that when you treat yourself like someone worthy of respect, you create a life that reflects that truth in every interaction, every boundary, every choice. Detachment does not mean that you stop caring. It means that you stop clinging. It is not indifference, but inner balance. When a man hurts you, your first instinct may be to hold tighter to the relationship, to the memories, to the idea of who he could have been. You replay conversations, dissect every detail, and hope that understanding will heal the pain. But what this actually does is bind you to the wound. Detachment, on the other hand, is the art of loosening that emotional grip. It is the process of saying, I can love what was, but I refuse to suffer over what no longer is. Shi Heng Yi often teaches that mastery is not about controlling others, but about controlling your own energy. Detachment is that mastery in motion. It's the ability to stay centered while the external world fluctuates. When you stop basing your peace on someone else's behavior, you realize that if your happiness rises and falls with how another person treats you, then you've given them the power to control your emotional climate. Detachment reclaims that power. It reminds you that your inner world is sacred territory. No one should have the right to enter it uninvited or disturb it at will. When you practice detachment, you create space between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting impulsively to his actions, words, or absence, you pause. You breathe. You observe your emotions without drowning in them. You say, I feel this pain, but I am not this pain. You witness the sadness, the anger, the confusion, but you don't become them. This level of self-awareness confuses the one who hurt you because it defies their expectations. They expected emotional chaos, not calm awareness. They expected tears, not tranquility. Detachment also means no longer personalizing someone's behavior. You stop making their disrespect a reflection of your worth. You stop taking their withdrawal as a judgment of your value. Instead, you begin to see that how someone treats you is a mirror of their inner world, not yours. Maybe they are lost, insecure, or emotionally unavailable. But that's their lesson to learn, not your burden to carry. You stop trying to fix what you didn't break. You stop taking responsibility for healing wounds that aren't yours. In the practice of detachment, silence becomes your teacher. You stop explaining your worth to people who never tried to understand it. You stop defending your choices to those who never respected them. You begin to realize that peace does not require closure, it requires clarity, and that clarity often comes not through confrontation but through stillness. You start to understand that some people's absence is the universe's protection, and some endings are acts of divine redirection. Detachment also invites you to let go of expectations. Expectation is often the root of suffering. You expect someone to apologize, to change, to return, or to understand you. When they don't, you spiral. But when you detach, you release the need for a specific outcome. Start trusting that whatever unfolds is exactly what you need for your growth, even if it doesn't align with what you wanted. You move from control to surrender, from force to flow. You no longer chase, you allow. You no longer demand, you observe. This calm acceptance is powerful because it shifts your energy completely. People can feel when you're desperate for closure or clinging to connection. It makes them feel superior, needed, or in control. But when you detach, that energy dissolves. You no longer give them emotional leverage. Your focus returns to your life, your goals, your peace. The man who once hurt you will sense that shift. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because you've truly let go. And nothing confuses someone who once had emotional power over you more than realizing they no longer occupy your thoughts. Shi Heng Yi describes this as the art of letting go without resentment. Detachment is not about pushing people away with anger. It's about releasing them with understanding. You recognize that holding on to pain binds you to it, while releasing it liberates you. You no longer seek justice through revenge or validation. Your peace becomes justice enough. You realize that the greatest revenge is not in proving them wrong, but in proving yourself healed. Detachment also means choosing yourself again and again, even when it hurts. It's choosing silence over confrontation when words no longer matter. It's choosing peace over closure when explanations won't change anything. Choosing to walk away, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally care about yourself more. You stop measuring love by intensity and start measuring it by stability. Stop mistaking chaos for passion and understand that peace is the highest form of love. As you grow more detached, your perception deepens. Start to see that pain was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to teach you discernment. It was meant to show you where your boundaries were weak, where your self-worth needed reinforcement, and where your attachment turned into dependence. You begin to view heartbreak not as punishment, but as purification, a cleansing of everything that was not aligned with your higher self. You see that letting go is not loss, transformation. Detachment brings you into the present moment. You stop living in the what if of the past or the maybe of the future. You stop replaying conversations and start creating new ones with yourself, your peace, with your purpose. You start realizing that the pain that once consumed you is losing its power because you've stopped feeding it attention. You no longer identify as the one who was hurt. You identify as the one who learned. People may misunderstand your detachment as coldness, but it's not. It's wisdom. It's the quiet strength that comes from learning not to depend on external validation for internal peace. The grace of walking away without resentment, of wishing well without wanting back, of remembering without reopening wounds. It's the power of knowing that your peace is worth more than your pride, and your energy is too sacred to be wasted on confusion. The more detached you become, the more magnetic your energy grows. You start to attract experiences that align with your calm, not your chaos. People who operate from manipulation or insecurity will find it hard to connect with you because they no longer understand your frequency. They can't provoke what you've transcended. Your silence speaks a new language, one of strength, clarity, and inner freedom. Detachment then becomes your spiritual armor. It protects without hardening. It allows you to love without losing yourself. Teaches you to give freely, but without expectation, to care deeply but without dependence, and to walk away peacefully when something disrupts your balance. The quiet confidence of knowing that you can feel everything without letting it consume you. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. What determines whether your pain destroys you or refines you is not the depth of the wound, but what you do with it. When a man hurts you, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, you stand at a crossroads. You can either let that pain define you, or you can let it shape you. You can either stay trapped in the story of betrayal, or you can use that story as fuel to become something stronger, wiser, and freer than you've ever been. Transforming pain into purpose is the sacred act of turning wounds into wisdom. How you reclaim power from the very thing that tried to break you. Shi Heng Yi teaches that every hardship carries within it a lesson, a seed of growth that only reveals itself through awareness. Pain, he says, is not the enemy, unconsciousness is. Most people run from their pain, drown it out, or project it onto others, never realizing that in doing so, they stay enslaved to it. But when you stop running and sit with your pain, when you face it fully, something shifts inside you. You begin to see that pain is not a punishment, it's an awakening. It is the universe's way of showing you what you need to heal, what patterns you need to release, what parts of yourself need your own love the most. When you begin to transform pain into purpose, you start asking different questions. Instead of, why did this happen to me? You ask, this trying to teach me. Instead of focusing on what was lost, you look for what can be learned. That shift in perspective alone changes everything. Suddenly, your pain becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. You begin to extract meaning from the very moments that once made you feel powerless. The transformation happens slowly at first. It's about survival. You wake up and try to make it through the day without falling apart. Then it becomes awareness. You start noticing patterns in yourself, realizing how your pain mirrors old wounds or fears. Eventually, it becomes growth. You start seeing how everything that happened had a purpose, how every heartbreak stripped away illusions, and how every disappointment redirected you toward truth. This is the alchemy of healing, turning emotional lead into gold, turning heartbreak into higher consciousness. Transforming pain into purpose doesn't mean pretending the hurt never existed. It means you stop allowing it to control your story. You stop identifying as the victim and begin identifying as the creator. You understand that what hurt you was simply a catalyst for your evolution. You begin to see your scars not as evidence of brokenness, but as proof of resilience. Each scar tells a story of survival, of growth, of strength. It says, I have been through fire, and yet I am still here, more aware, more compassionate, more grounded. As you start living with this awareness, you find yourself drawn to things that nurture your spirit. You pour your energy into learning, creating, helping, and healing. You might write, meditate, teach, or simply live more intentionally. The pain that once silenced you now gives you a voice. Betrayal that once broke you now fuels your purpose. You become someone who can look another person in pain and say, I know how this feels, and I promise it won't destroy you. Your experience becomes empathy. Your story becomes medicine. Shi Heng Yi often reminds his students that nothing in life is wasted, not even the suffering. Every experience contributes to your inner development if you meet it with awareness. The man who hurt you may have been a teacher in disguise, sent to awaken parts of you that had been asleep. He may have exposed where your boundaries were weak, where your self-love was conditional, or where your identity depended too heavily on another person's validation. Once you see this, you no longer need to hold resentment. You begin to thank the pain, not because it was pleasant, but because it revealed your potential. Transforming pain into purpose also means shifting your energy from blame to creation. You stop saying, he ruined me, and start saying, he redirected me. You stop focusing on the damage and start focusing on the lesson. You take all the energy that was once spent on trying to understand him and redirect it into understanding yourself. You ask, what did I ignore? What can I learn from this? How can I grow so that I never repeat this pattern again? In doing so, you stop being a prisoner of the past and become a sculptor of your future. As you rise from that pain, your energy changes. Begin to attract opportunities and people that align with your new frequency. You find that your relationships improve, not because others change, but because you have. You no longer settle for half-hearted love. You've learned what it feels like to be whole on your own. You no longer chase validation because your purpose validates your existence. The hurt that once weakened you now becomes the foundation of your power. Transformation confuses those who hurt you. They expect bitterness, resentment, or emotional chaos, but instead they see peace, purpose, and progress. You no longer seek revenge. You've outgrown the version of yourself that was attached to the pain. You've learned that the best response to hurt is evolution. You rise so steadily, so quietly, that those who underestimated you can only watch in disbelief. Your glow becomes the evidence of your healing. In this space, you begin to live with intention. You stop moving through life unconsciously. You realize that your energy is sacred and that your story has meaning. You start to use your experiences to help others who are still lost in theirs. Your empathy deepens, but so does your discernment. You no longer save others at the cost of yourself, but you guide, inspire, and uplift through authenticity. Your pain becomes your teacher, your fuel, and your purpose, all at once. The beauty of this transformation lies in its quiet power. You don't announce your healing, you embody it. You don't seek validation for your growth, you simply live it. You stop being defined by what broke you, and you start being defined by what you built from it. Every choice you make, every step you take, becomes an act of self-respect and purpose. You begin to see that the journey wasn't about him at all. It was about you awakening to your own strength, your own clarity, your own light. And in that awakening, something profound happens. Pain that once consumed you begins to dissolve, not because it disappears, but because it has fulfilled its purpose. It has taught you what you came here to learn. It has shown you how strong you truly are, has guided you back to yourself, the most powerful place you could ever stand. And so, when a man hurts you, do not let that pain define the boundaries of your existence. Instead, let it become the soil where your strength takes root. Do not chase revenge, for vengeance keeps you tied to the same energy that wounded you. Do not cling to explanations, for understanding someone's darkness will not restore your light. Instead, rise silently, gracefully, and powerfully. There is no greater confusion to those who wronged you than your calm evolution, no louder statement than your peace. When you heal, you do not just free yourself. You change the entire vibration of what once hurt you. You stop fighting for closure and begin living in clarity. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Thank you for showing me who I am." You return to yourself, whole, unshaken, radiant. You no longer need to prove your worth because you've remembered it. You no longer fear loss because you've learned that what is truly yours cannot be taken. Your power was never in your reaction. It was in your restraint. It was never in controlling others. It was in mastering yourself. Shi Heng Yi's wisdom echoes here. The mind that cannot be disturbed is the strongest mind of all. When you reach that stillness, when you can stand in the aftermath of pain with your heart open and your peace intact, you have already won. That is the ultimate confusion to anyone who tried to break you. Your softness survived the storm, and your strength was born from it. You have taken back your power, not by fighting for it, but by remembering it was yours all along.